What happens when the person who is supposed to protect you, love you, cherish you, is your greatest enemy? What happens when the person who you are supposed to be able to turn to is one of the people you have to turn away from? Family is supposed to be everything. Family is the cornerstone of our lives, the foundation upon which we build our identities. It has been said that a happy family is but an earlier heaven. But what if you're living in a daily hell? Veronica Gonzalez was convicted and sentenced to death for the brutal torture and murder of her 4-year-old niece, Jenny Rojas, in 1995. And it became one of the most infamous child abuse cases in California, resulting in her placement on death row. I'm your host, JT, and this is Women on Death Row. Let's get into it. Born in 1966 in California, Veronica Gonzalez's early life experiences significantly impacted her psychological development, which contributed to her later behavior. By her early adult years, she had become a mother and was responsible for the care of several children. Gonzalez was the aunt of Jenny Rojas. You see, Jenny and her siblings were taken from their parents after their mother went into a drug rehabilitation program, and her husband was arrested for child molestation. Jenny was first placed with Veronica Gonzalez's mother, but Veronica agreed to take Jenny in because her mother had other children to care for. Early in 1995, when she was 4 years old, Jenny came to live with Veronica, her husband Ivan, and their 6 children in an apartment in Chula Vista, California. On the evening of July 21st, 1995, Marisa Lozano, a young neighbor in the apartment building, was standing outside when she heard a child crying in Veronica's apartment. Very soon after, she heard a bang. She said it was, quote, like if something hit a wall. Suddenly, the crying stopped. Ivan Gonzalez looked out a window, then shut it and closed the curtains. A few minutes later, Ivan came out of the apartment, slammed the door, and left, looking angry. Marisa's Aunt Naomi then called for her to come inside, as she was supposed to each night at 8 o'clock. Ivan appeared at a local liquor store around 8:45 p.m., where he bought milk, cereal, and candy. No more than an hour later, Marisa heard another commotion, and someone said that a little girl had died. Going outside, Marisa saw Ivan carrying a child into the apartment where Marisa's Aunt Patty lived. Marisa heard Veronica say, quote, "Don't call the cops." Naomi Espinoza said that sometime after 9 o'clock that evening, there was some noise and she heard someone call to her. She came out of her apartment and saw Ivan carrying a little girl. Naomi asked him what had happened. Ivan said the child had burned herself with hot water and that she did not know how to regulate the water, which seems a bit specific, and what also seems to be establishing an alibi or excuse. Veronica was standing next to Ivan at the time. Naomi asked him to bring the child into her sister Patty's apartment, which was across from the Gonzalez's. Ivan did so, and Veronica followed suit. Ivan placed the child on the floor. Because Naomi had been trained as a nurse assistant, she proceeded to check for a pulse and to see if Jenny was breathing. There was no pulse, and the body was dry, very cold, and slightly rigid. In either case, as anyone in the medical field would do, she tried to perform CPR and told her husband to call 911. Veronica, however, said, "Don't call the police, because then we will get blamed for it." Naomi was unable to resuscitate Jenny, but upon even the briefest examination she had performed, it seemed as if Jenny had been dead for a while. In addition, Naomi noticed a bald spot on the child's head, marks on her neck and right arm, and a purplish color on her leg. While Naomi was attempting CPR, Veronica was running in and out of the apartment looking extremely nervous. I can say this is not the behavior of someone who cares about a child, especially their own, or at least someone they brought into their home as their own. Naomi remembered that earlier in the evening, between 6 and 7, the Gonzales' son, Ivan Jr., had come to Patty's apartment and asked for some rubbing alcohol. Naomi noticed that the son had a very weird, blank stare. At around 9:20 p.m., officers arrived at the scene. William Moe met Veronica as he approached the apartment. She told him right away that she had put the baby in the bathtub and later found her not breathing or responsive. Moe checked the child for a pulse and respiration, but did not attempt CPR because both he and Bennett, the other officer, concluded she was obviously dead because the body was very cold to the touch. Bennett noted that the child was wearing only a shirt, which was dry, as was her hair. She had bare patches and open wounds on her scalp, signs of trauma on her face, and a ligature mark under her throat. She was a little rigid, leading Bennett to think that rigor mortis might be setting in. As he knelt next to the body of Jenny Rojas, Veronica said she had to run the bath water, put the child in the bath, and then went to cook dinner. 20 minutes later, she returned, and the child had slipped under the water. So she grabbed her and went to another apartment to call 911. As Veronica spoke, Ivan was sitting there simply as someone who likes to observe. Moe and Bennett, the officers, then went to the Gonzales apartment, where they found the other children. The bathtub was empty and dry. 10 or 15 minutes after the police arrived, the fire department came to the apartment. The fireman who assessed Jenny said she was cold and without a pulse. Eventually, a medical examiner arrived around 1 in the morning. In addition to the initial observations, the following was found by both the ME and the evidence technicians. Be prepared, because it's really rough to hear. Jenny had a thermal burn from the waist to the toes and numerous other injuries on her body, especially on her face. There was a burn injury from the top of Jenny's head down and across the back of her scalp. The burn was healing as it was estimated to be 6 days to several weeks old, but it was infected. There was hair loss in the burn area and thinning and bald patches elsewhere on the scalp. These could have been caused by the hair being pulled out or by nutritional deficiencies. There were scars on Jenny's shoulders that were also consistent with burn injuries. They matched the burned area on the back of her head, if the neck was bent back. An area of hair was spared between the burn on the head and the shoulders. It was surmised that the injury could have been caused by a hot liquid being poured over Jenny's head. As if that wasn't enough, the ME also discovered a subdural hematoma inside the skull. This was a life-threatening injury for Jenny. It could have been caused by a blow or violent shaking, and it seemed to be a few hours old. There was a subarachnoid hemorrhage, typically the result of a direct impact to the head. This wasn't life-threatening, however, because it was weeks, perhaps months old. There was also a pinpoint hemorrhage, or petechia, in the white of Jenny's right eye. This injury can be caused by strangulation and normally disappears after a few days, if the victim survives. The area around her right eye was bruised, and the examiner estimated that it was a few days old. The left eye was also bruised, and there were abrasions above both eyes in the eyebrow area. Linear abrasions extended across her face from her left ear and the skin was worn away on the bridge of her nose. The skin on the rim of both ears was also worn off, exposing cartilage. It was determined that these abrasions could have been caused by a tight band around her head. It's just incredible in all the worst ways. This poor child. There were bruises on Jenny's right cheek and chin, and on both cheeks there were recent burns in a grid pattern, which matched the grill of a blow dryer found in the Gonzales apartment. These bruises seemed to occur within hours before Jenny's death. One of these scars curved in a way that indicated Jenny may have pulled away when the burn was inflicted. Both cheeks also bore multiple small circular marks, which could have been caused by the bristles of a brush. Inside Jenny's lower lip was a laceration, extending down into the gutter between the gum and lip. This injury was inflamed and could have been several days old. The blow dryer was set on high, and it wasn't plugged in when it was collected by an evidence technician. Jenny's neck was marked with linear scars as well, ulcerated in places which were consistent with a long period of hanging with her weight partially supported by her feet. They were probably 3 weeks old. There were also linear ulcerated scars around Jenny's upper arms, which could have been caused by handcuffs over an extended period. Scars on her wrists could have been caused by handcuffs or by a cord. On her right shoulder were burn marks in a grid pattern matching the burns on Jenny's cheeks, and the shoulder was scraped as well. The left arm had multiple injuries, including abrasions and a recent bruise. The handcuff scars, diagonal scars that appeared to be old injuries, and recent burns in the grid pattern. The top of the left shoulder was bruised and abraded, with some triangular scars. Jenny's thighs were bruised in a pattern indicated that they had been grabbed forcefully several times. There were ulcerated areas on the back of her ankles, which were several days to a couple of weeks old. Jenny's spleen and thymus glands were atrophied, a sign of chronic stress. A pair of handcuffs were found in the Gonzales apartment, and they matched Jenny's scars. The burn on Jenny's lower body was a deep, third-degree burn, which removed the superficial layer of her skin. Areas on the backs of her knees were spared, which showed that she was kneeling when she was burned. Jenny's burn extended from her chest to her feet and was recent, probably hours old. It appeared to be a forcible immersion burn, in which she was held down with her hands and arms out of the water, unable to get herself up. There was no evidence of the splashing that would have occurred if she tried to get out of the water. The burn could have been inflicted in 3 to 10 seconds by water between 140 and 148 degrees. This burn was the cause of death, although it would have been a survivable burn had she sought treatment for it. Without treatment, a child Jenny's size would go into shock and die in treatment. As the state of shock progressed, the child would slowly lose consciousness, becoming pale, cold, and clammy. Rigor mortis could set in within 2 or 3 hours of death. The examiner ruled out drowning as a cause of death because there was no water in Jenny's lungs. He deemed the death homicide in that the burn did not appear to be accidental. Of course, the ME isn't the only person who showed up on the scene. Evidence technicians were sent as well. They find the following items that are important to the case: a residue of human skin, including toenails, in the bathtub. Water temperature from the tap reached 156 degrees, then dropped to 148 degrees after 5 minutes. After running for 15 minutes, the water in the tub reached the overflow drain and was 140 degrees. A bedroom door had a rag tied around both doorknobs, attached to a piece of twine that was tied to a drawer handle on the nightstand close to the wall and near the door. In the area between the door was a wet blanket that smelled of urine and feces and looked to be bloodstained. An indentation in the wall 36 inches up from the floor, which matched the size of Jenny's head and was stained with blood. A cut-off section of pant leg was found in the room, tied on one side, forming a cap or hood. Hair and what seemed to be bloodstains were found on the material. There was a large wooden box in a closet that was in the same bedroom as just mentioned. A sliding door was removed from the track and leaned into the closet, propped against the box and braced by a desk outside of it. The top edge of the box next to the closet wall was 2 inches wide. There was a material consistent with blood or feces collected from that surface. A stain was found on the edge of the box, appearing to be a toe print, and there were more stains in the box, along with feces. Above the box in the center of the closet was a brace, supporting the wooden clothes bar with a steel hook attached. The closet door had a hole from the outside where one would be able to see the hook, and bloodstains were found on the underside of the clothes bar, the brace, the inside of the closet door, and the back wall of the closet above the box. There was also a small footprint just above the box. During the trial, the prosecutor showed 2 videotaped interviews Veronica gave to the police after waiving her right to remain silent. Here's what Veronica said happened in the second interview, because the first interview had a less coherent Veronica. Either way, you can't take this as the truth at all for most of it, and you'll see why. Not much of it makes sense. She was making dinner around 7 that night that Jenny died. She put Jenny in a lukewarm bath around 7:30. Ivan was in the kitchen. Veronica looked in on Jenny after 7 to 10 minutes. Ivan went to the store and came back in less than 5 minutes. 20 minutes after that, Veronica took the blow dryer away from her kids because they were playing with it and it was hot. When she walked past the bathroom, Jenny was lying in the tub, face up but turned to the side. The water was now very hot. She pulled Jenny from the tub and called Ivan. They took her to a bedroom and used a fan to try and cool her off. They also used rubbing alcohol in an effort to cool her and wake her up with the smell. They blew on her. They attempted CPR. Water was coming out of her mouth. After 5 or 10 minutes, Jenny was still not responding, so Victoria went to Patty's apartment for help. Victoria said that she could not say there were marks on Jenny's face, and that she could also not explain the ligature mark. Nor could she account for the marks on Jenny's arms, or why Jenny's upper body was not burned in the tub. She quickly started in this interview implicating Ivan when presented with the idea that he might be implicating her. She said Ivan would hit her and has a heavier arm than her, and said that she didn't hold Jenny in the water, but that, quote, I can put that on him maybe. Victoria also said that the blow dryer was in the room when they were trying to revive Jenny, and she said that she used it to try and give her some air. Quote, maybe I got it a little too close, 'cause she was moving. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. She said that she and Ivan put the handcuffs on Jenny to keep her from picking at her wounds. Once, Ivan put them on her all night. You see, Veronica would try to restrain Jenny with a cloth tie, but she would free herself. She said they would make Jenny stay in the closet, and that Ivan put her in the box previously mentioned for punishment. Jenny would come out when, quote, she started being good. She was put in the closet, quote, maybe 3 or 4 days, just to scare her. Just so she could think. But I mean, there was no torture, there was no, nothing like that. She reported that Jenny was scraping her head against the ledge around the rim of the box. So they put the lid on the box and made her sit or stand on it. To keep her from falling, they tied her to the hook. They apparently did this only for 2 days, a few hours at a time. But then Veronica conceded that Jenny spent a whole night tied to the hook. Veronica also talked about how Ivan would hit the kids, and sometimes with a belt. He used to hit Jenny when she picked at her scabs or when she yelled. She did say she had hit Jenny as well, but when she was pressed about how the fatal burn happened, she acknowledged that someone must have held Jenny down. But she said it wasn't her. She didn't see Ivan do it, and she had not heard anything, but remembered that Jenny told Ivan, quote, "Please don't drown me." She also remembered Ivan said, "You don't tell me what to do." Ivan went to the store. 15 minutes later, Veronica found Jenny in the tub, burned. She was unconscious, sitting up, but beginning to slide down. Veronica said she knew she should be punished for what happened to Jenny. When asked about if Ivan should be punished, she said, "Damn right." The defense called a forensic pathologist who said that Jenny's burns could have occurred in 3 to 5 seconds in 140-degree water, and that she could have died due to shock within an hour. He also thought that Jenny's subdural hematoma could have resulted from a violent shaking in an attempt to revive her. The defense also brought up a forensic psychologist with experience in child abuse cases where they introduced video and audio tapes of interviews with Victoria's oldest child, Ivan Jr. They interviewed Ivan Jr. multiple times, and each time they would tell him to be sure to tell the truth and that they knew he wasn't telling the truth. Just as an aside, if you approach a child with that, especially a kid that is 8, and you are an authority figure, eventually the child is going to start searching for a truth that you want to hear, just to stop being asked questions. I'm going to fast forward past that portion, simply because he was a child then, and the items that did match what Victoria said were the exact same as what I just told you about. Ivan Jr. didn't testify at Victoria's trial. On rebuttal, the prosecution called a coworker of Ivan's who had an affair with Veronica. He said that she, quote, had the upper hand in the relationship. The fellow's father also said that she was the boss of the apartment, telling Ivan what to do, and if he didn't, she would curse at him and push him. Mark Mills, a forensic psychiatrist, testified for the prosecution. The court had ordered Victoria to submit to an evaluation by Dr. Mills. She refused, on the advice of counsel, as the jury had learned during her testimony. Dr. Mills had reviewed the videotaped interviews of her and transcripts of her trial testimony. He offered no clinical or forensic opinion, but gave his opinion on 3 issues. First, Mills said that the fact that Victoria faced the death penalty provided a motive for malingering, i.e., a conscious attempt to deceive psychological evaluations about her mental state. Second, he opined that if Victoria had post-traumatic stress disorder, it did not interfere with her ability to perceive reality or her free will. Finally, Mills believed the inconsistencies in Victoria's various accounts of events in her life made it impossible to reliably conclude that she had post-traumatic stress disorder. Victoria did submit to an evaluation by the other mental health expert called by the prosecution, Nancy Kaiser-Boyd. Kaiser-Boyd, a psychologist, met with Victoria over the course of 2 days for around 15 hours, 7 of which were spent on testing. Victoria communicated well, and Kaiser-Boyd estimated her intelligence as, quote, certainly average and probably above average. Victoria's test results were inconsistent with those usually obtained from battered women, and consistent with those of a subject who is exaggerating her symptoms. In 1998, Veronica Gonzalez was sentenced to death. Her husband, Ivan Gonzalez, was tried separately and also received the maximum sentence, making them the first married couple in California on death row for the same crime. Her case has since undergone numerous appeals. Despite these appeals, the California Supreme Court has upheld her conviction and death sentence, emphasizing the severity of the crime and the substantial evidence of her guilt. Thank you for tuning into Women on Death Row. Don't forget to like this video and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought about the case. If you've liked what you've seen, please be sure to subscribe to our channel, and then become a member by clicking the join button, and get notified when each of these videos in this series is released. Until next time, take care of yourself, your friends, your family, and your community. Don't let anybody dull your sparkle. And shine on, you crazy diamonds. Shine on.